Welcome to RankLens. Today, we count down the top 10 longest reigning monarchs in recorded history. Some monarchs rule for decades. Others reshape entire continents. But what about the rare few who held the crown for so long, they became living monuments to history itself? Today, we're counting down the 10 longest reigning monarchs in recorded history. Rulers who didn't just inherit a throne, they dominated it for generations. From child kings who ruled for nearly a century to queens who defined entire eras. These are the monarchs who saw empires rise and fall, watched the world transform, all from a single throne. We're going from number 10 all the way to the top, revealing the ruler who wore a crown longer than anyone else in human history. Ready? Let's begin. At number 10, we have Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom, who reigned for 63.6 years. Victoria ascended to the throne at just 18 years old, and her reign was so transformative that an entire era bears her name, the Victorian Age. During her decades in power, the British Empire reached its absolute peak. This wasn't just a kingdom expanding. It was the British Empire at its height of industrial and colonial domination, spreading its influence across the globe. Victoria's influence extended far beyond the borders of Britain. Her grandchildren married into royal families across Europe, earning her the enduring title, the Grandmother of Europe, a nickname that speaks to how thoroughly she rewove the continent's royal bloodlines. By the time Victoria died, she had redefined what it meant to be a monarch, and she had done it for nearly 64 years. At number 9, we have Ramesses II of ancient Egypt, with a reign of 66.0 years. This pharaoh didn't just rule Egypt, he dominated it for nearly 7 decades, leaving a legacy carved into stone across the entire civilization. Ramesses II was legendary for his productivity. He reportedly fathered over 100 children during his extraordinarily long reign, creating a vast family dynasty that would echo through generations. But his influence went far beyond his bloodline. Ramesses II negotiated the Treaty of Kadesh with the Hittite Empire, one of the earliest known peace treaties in recorded history. This wasn't just a diplomatic agreement, it was a moment when two superpowers of the ancient world sat down and decided coexistence was better than endless war. Beyond politics, Ramesses II was a builder on an almost superhuman scale. He commissioned more colossal monuments and statues than any pharaoh before or after him. According to historical records, his building projects literally defined the visual landscape of ancient Egypt. At number 8, Franz Joseph I of Austria-Hungary, ruling for 68.0 years. Franz Joseph's reign was a masterclass in endurance, but it was also a tragic one. He ascended to the throne during one of Europe's most turbulent eras, and he presided over the creation of the Austro-Hungarian dual monarchy in 1867. This wasn't just a political arrangement, it was the reshaping of a continental power to survive the age of nationalism. His 68-year reign spanned some of Europe's most pivotal moments. He watched as Germany unified right next door, and he lived to see the outbreak of World War I, the conflict that would ultimately end his empire. But Franz Joseph's reign wasn't defined by triumphs alone. He suffered profound personal tragedies that haunted his entire life. His wife, Empress Elizabeth, was assassinated in 1898, a devastating blow that marked him forever. Franz Joseph endured it all, holding his fractious empire together for nearly 7 decades. At number 7, Janaab, Pakal of the Maya city-state of Palenque, reigning for 68.0 years. Pakal's story is one of extraordinary longevity in an ancient world where most rulers didn't live past middle age. He rose to power over the Maya city-state of Palenque at just 12 years old, a child inheriting one of the great centers of Maya civilization. For 7 decades, Pakal guided Palenque through prosperity and expansion, commissioning monuments that would outlast his empire by more than 1,000 years. Most notably, he commissioned the Temple of the Inscriptions, which became his own elaborate burial monument, a structure so sophisticated that archaeologists still marvel at its engineering. Within that temple lies Pakal's sarcophagus, and its lid is one of the most celebrated artifacts of ancient Mesoamerican art. The carvings on that sarcophagus tell the story of Pakal's cosmic journey, depicting him as a divine figure descending into the underworld. 7 decades of one man's vision transformed Palenque into a jewel of the Maya world. At number 6, Johann II of Liechtenstein, who reigned for 70.2 years. Johann II earned the enduring title the Good, a rare compliment in a centuries-long history of European monarchy. He ruled this small alpine nation for over 7 decades, watching empires collapse around him while his tiny principality endured. During his long reign, Johann II oversaw something remarkable: the drafting of Liechtenstein's modern liberal constitution, adopted in 1921. This wasn't a backward ruler clinging to the past. This was a monarch who understood that the future belonged to constitutional government. By bringing liberal democracy to Liechtenstein, he positioned his nation to survive and thrive in the modern era, long after monarchs in neighboring countries had been swept away by revolution. Here's where the story gets interesting. Despite ruling Liechtenstein for over 7 decades, Johann II rarely actually visited his own country. He preferred to live in Vienna, Austria, far from his realm, governing from a distance. It's a peculiar detail that underscores how governance itself was changing in the 20th century. Yet his 70-year reign transformed Liechtenstein into a modern, stable nation. At number 5, Bhumibol, Adulyadej of Thailand, who reigned for 73 years. Bhumibol Adulyadej was the world's longest reigning living head of state at the time of his death, a title that speaks to both his longevity and his singular importance to his nation. In Thailand, the monarchy occupies a position of reverence unlike almost any other place in the world. Bhumibol is deeply revered by his people, and Thailand's strict lèse-majesté laws protect the dignity of the crown, a legal framework that underscores just how sacred the monarchy is to Thai society. His 70-year reign was not one of peace and stability, though. Thailand experienced numerous military coups during his lifetime, moments when the government was seized by generals and the constitution suspended. Through all of that chaos, Bhumibol remained the steady center, the one constant in a politically turbulent nation. He guided Thailand through these crises with a moral authority that transcended politics. According to accounts of his reign, Bhumibol used his moral standing to help heal national wounds. 7 decades of service to a nation in constant transformation. At number 4, Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom, reigning for 70.6 years. Elizabeth II became queen at just 25 years old, following the death of her father, King George VI. She was young, she was untested, and suddenly the weight of the British Empire fell on her shoulders. Over the course of her reign, Elizabeth served alongside 15 different British prime ministers, from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss. That's an extraordinary span. She worked with leaders who fought in World War II and with leaders born after the war had ended. For most of the 20th century, Elizabeth embodied the continuity of the British state. Then came a historic milestone. In 2015, Elizabeth surpassed Queen Victoria's record to become Britain's longest-reigning monarch ever. Victoria had held the record for over a century, but Elizabeth broke through that ceiling and kept going. She continued to reign for another 6 years after that historic moment, eventually reaching 70.6 years. Elizabeth II didn't just reign, she redefined what it meant to be a modern monarch. At number 3, Louis XIV of France, who reigned for 72.3 years. Louis XIV's story begins with an almost impossible scenario. He became King of France at just 4 years old. For a child that young to survive to adulthood while holding the crown was remarkable enough, but for him to then go on to rule for 72 years was nearly unthinkable. He inherited a kingdom and spent his entire life reshaping it into Europe's most dominant power. The ultimate symbol of his vision was the Palace of Versailles, the grandest royal court ever built, a monument to absolute monarchy so spectacular that it influenced palace design across the continent. Versailles wasn't just a palace, it was a statement. The king and the state were one, and the state was France, and France was the center of the world. Louis XIV's 72-year reign cemented France as the dominant cultural and military power of the entire era. He took a kingdom and transformed it into an empire, and he did it all from behind the walls of a palace so magnificent that echoes of it still define our ideas of royal power today. At number 2, Sobhuza II of Swaziland, who reigned for 82.7 years. We're entering the realm of truly extraordinary longevity now. Sobhuza II holds the record as the longest reigning monarch in the modern verified era, a reign so long that it spanned nearly the entire 20th century. Sobhuza II was installed as king while still an infant, a child too young to even remember his own coronation. But he was surrounded by regents and advisors who guided the kingdom through its early years, and as he grew, he took more and more control. In 1968, Sobhuza II led Swaziland to independence from British rule, a moment that defined his entire reign. He transformed his nation from a colonial territory into an independent kingdom on the world stage. And through it all, through wars, through political upheaval, through the social revolutions of the 20th century, Sobhuza II remained on the throne. His 82.7-year reign is so long that it changed what we think is even possible for a human being to rule. One man, one throne, nearly a century. And finally, at number 1, Pepi II, Neferkare of ancient Egypt, who reigned for an astonishing 94 years. This is where we step into territory that challenges the very limits of what we think is possible. Pepi II ascended Egypt's throne as a child of approximately 6 years old, a boy so young he could barely understand what he was inheriting. But somehow, impossibly, this boy king went on to rule for 94 years. That's not just long, that's incomprehensible by modern standards. What happened during those 9 decades? According to historical analysis, Pepi II's extraordinarily long reign actually weakened central authority in Egypt. The pharaoh became distant, aging, less able to hold the realm together. Regional governors grew more powerful. The bonds that had held the old kingdom together began to fray. And then, shortly after Pepi II's death, the entire Old Kingdom of Egypt collapsed. Some historians believe that his extremely long reign actually contributed to that collapse. That a century of rule by a distant, aging pharaoh left the kingdom fragmented and vulnerable. A reign so long, it outlasted an empire. What does this countdown reveal? That longevity and success are not the same thing. Some of history's longest reigning monarchs, like Elizabeth II and Louis XIV, left legacies of cultural achievement and stability. Others, like Pepi II, saw their realms fragment under the weight of endless rule. The oldest monarchs often found themselves presiding over transformation they couldn't control, adapting to worlds unrecognizable from their childhood. Yet each of these 10 rulers left an indelible mark on history. They shaped empires, redefined nations, and proved that one person, with enough time, can leave a legacy that echoes across centuries. What made them different wasn't just how long they ruled, it was how completely they dominated their era. And that's the top 10 longest reigning monarchs in recorded history. If you enjoyed this countdown, subscribe to RankLens for more.